All right, so we've had several advanced OCR sessions on tab 29 that we've actually converted to part of the training, and then we've got a couple of bonus sections, and this is probably just going to be a real quick bonus section. Well, real quick, it won't be 2 hours, but it might be 10 minutes. So real quickly, let's look at a 10-minute convergence on the bottom side for which we're going to have some movement up. And our 1-minute wave follows suit. Okay, so I'm already thinking about one thing I want to show, and I'm starting to draw that. Well, I wanted to show this first one first. No sense. All right, so a couple of things about what goes on here and why it happens, just so we know, so we can see when things are different, right? So in this normal progression, at the point of convergence, we know one thing, that impulsivity is up. And what that means then is, Newton, Babson, whoever, came up with the whole action reaction, or an object in motion stays in motion until something inertia. Maybe it's Einstein. I don't know. One of those brainiacs. We're going to assume impulsivity is up until we're told it's not. Not us guessing, but the chart's going to tell us. Of course, we have one general assumption, and we know that is if it makes it to the other side, that would be an automatic impulsivity flip, because that is a convergence, and therefore the impulsivity would be down as the 10-minute wave now heads off in the other direction. So the question is, what happens if impulsivity reverses in here? Can we see it? So a couple of attributes we have to build foundation here is, there's a reason this 1-minute wave here is short, which gives us the higher low. And there's a reason this 1-minute wave is even shorter than this one, shorter in terms of making it all the way down to the bottom. And there's a reason for that, and that is because of this impulsivity, there is upward pressure. And if you would just consider the bottom of this wave being a small bag of feathers, if there was no fan blowing up, it would just settle to the bottom. But the higher we move up and the further we move up the move, the impulsivity remains the same. This gets stronger as measured relatively from the bottom. So the upward pressure is what prevents these waves from coming down further, which is why when we do have them flip, it's an excellent sign that it's going to turn around and go. All right, so remember that now. The other thing that you'll note in this scenario, well, no, I don't want to do it that way. I'm going to see if you notice. All right, so let's look at a scenario where we have our 10-minute convergence and it starts moving out. And I'm just going to play with the 1-minute wave at this point. You have to understand the 10-minute wave is cycling with it, but I don't want to try and be perfect and match them up and whatnot. So just understand we're dealing with an impulsive move up. Our 1-minute waves are doing what they're doing. And then we have this kind of scenario. So it pulls back and it starts moving up again. Well, per definition, the impulsivity was up at the convergence. We have a higher low. So the impulsivity is still, and the strength is still upward, as evidenced by a shorter move down, which gives us the higher low. And then what happens is something like this. It goes up here, and now it comes down, and we have a lower low. So automatically, that's a no buy. That's not a qualified buy at that point. So we had buy 1 here, and we had buy 2 here. We have no buy here because instead of the higher low, we have a lower low. So automatically, that sets a question into our head about this may be the impulsivity flip. And so we have to wait now. There's no trade there. We have to wait and see what it's going to decide. It'll either reveal that the impulsivity is still up or that it has reversed there. And how's it going to do that? By the height here of the move up. So if the move up comes here and it's short of this high here, now we know that this is actually not just our thinking, but now we know that was a flip in impulsivity. And at that point, this now becomes a lower high, so it becomes a sell. What you will notice, and whether we reverse this and start at the top and then come back up and reverse the impulsivity up, what you'll always notice in this from a trading standpoint is there's always a no trade move in between the flip of impulsivity from how we trade. In other words, we had a buy at convergence, we took it up, we exited, we got in here in our buy, we exited, there was no buy here. This is a danger sign with this being a lower low. We get confirmation right here at this point. We can question, better move to another color. We can question this as being the point of flip and impulsivity. We don't get it confirmed until this wave ends up being shorter than this one. And then it's no longer a question. We now know it. We can take that sell. And again, if the impulsivity did flip, we're going to have some sort of impulsive move down. There's going to be a retreat, and it's going to move down. And this now becomes another, I guess that was a way to better use that. This becomes another sell because, once again, it is a lower high. Now, a word of caution about when you may not want to take some trades. So here's a scenario where we can see the impulsivity flip. A place that I'm kind of selective and I don't like to gamble. With our convergence, our 1 minute wave came down and it's moving out, and we have our first pullback and it moves up, and we have a second pullback that's deeper. So once again, impulsivity is up, we have a higher low, we have our second buy, or B2 if you want. And again, we don't treat these any differently. We enter, we exit, we enter, we exit. This comes down, so this is our no buy. We then see, as we did over here, this qualified sale. So price moved up. We now think this was the impulsivity flip. We have the shorter high. We would do the sell. But what if, so that's just kind of duplicating what we had over there, but what if instead of this being lower, it looked like we were continuing upward? My OCD nature there. So we have the higher low, we have a move up, and we have another higher low. Getting sloppy with my diagram. I apologize. Let me go back to this. It's a little bit of, I'm trying to emphasize one thing and I'm not paying attention. So what happens here is we have the higher low. So that is indeed our second buy. We now, price continues to move up some, it pulls back, we have another higher low. But notice this one looks different. And the reason it looks different is this. What we've normally done and normally see with our moves as they go up in this, in our progression is one of two things is going to happen. But normally, as we have these higher lows, we also have higher highs. We don't talk about that because all our interaction is down here, but we do want to pay attention to it. So we do have our higher lows. And typically, they're accompanied with higher highs. And what that ultimately gives us is some semblance of a channel, and it may be it may be a perfect touch kind of channel, or it may be just loosely defined, but we see the tops and the bottoms, and it's impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse correction, and every impulsive move goes to a higher high, and every retreat, every retracement comes to a higher low. This is different. And it's a little bit of a warning signal. Remember when I put up the first diagram, I said the reason this first 1 minute wave doesn't come all the way down is what? Well, we know there's impulsivity out of the gate. And the fact that this ends up shorter, thus giving us a higher low, is testimony to the fact that there is upward pressure here, and this wave just can't come down below it. It can't come down lower. And as I said, the farther this entire moves up, the harder that pressure gets, the stronger that pressure gets, which is why the subsequent lows typically are higher lows. That's telling you the impulsivity or the strength of the move is still very much upward. Also at the same time, because the pressure's upward and in the direction of the move, the 1 minute wave should have no problem in most of these cases in getting to an extreme. Something very close to it. If it doesn't, the progression of these waves should at least be up. But it should get up here. If you find one that gets up here and then the second peak is lower, we have a mixed signal with no trade in between. In other words, this was a qualified buy because we had a higher low. Impulsivity was up. We assume it's up until we see it's changed. We have a higher low. That becomes a buy. We have a higher low. Well, that would become a buy normally. Except I'm going to be a little, conservative. I'm not taking that trade. And the reason I'm not is something caused this wave to have an inability to float all the way to the top like it should. There is something exerting a force down. And that's not good because now we have conflicting signals. I've got something that says there's still a pretty strong impulsive move up, but I got something up here that's saying I'm not letting this guy just float to the top like he should. If there was no hindrance, if there was nothing impeding it, this little tiny fan down here that's blowing hard to keep these feathers from dropping, it would just push them all the way to the ceiling eventually. But something's stopping it up here, and it's exerting a force down. So this is a case where I wouldn't take this buy 3. It's qualified in the sense that it's a higher low, but I would disqualify it because of that. There was no reversal of impulsivity in here. And realize this is a sell signal. It is a lower high from this move up here. It's not coming from a convergence, but that's our general progression. If we have lower highs, we're assuming impulsivity is flipped. The reason this is confusing is simply because there was no point where we had the disqualified buy. This high was lower if this low was higher. If this low was lower, then we have our disqualified buy, and then the shorter top we understand because we have an impulsivity flip. But right now, there was no disqualified buy. This buy is still a higher low, and I'm getting something here that shows there's pressure down and would qualify as a sell signal. So it's an area of, I just don't want to mess with this. Now, if I do take this buy, I want to pay attention to what happens here. One of two things. It's going to resume the impulsivity up because we haven't seen it change, because we haven't had a disqualified trade technically. Or it's going to reveal itself as still in squirrely mode. In other words, if this now has a high that goes up and we have a lower high, we're back on track. And so I would take that buy, obviously. But what very well may happen, now again, remember, we had no disqualified buys here. This was a higher low. This is a higher low. The only thing that makes this a little funny is the fact that our tops going up are becoming lower. If this next top, instead of going up again and then giving us a higher low, if this next top stays short, continuing the trend of this, we've got a real problem because we're probably entering some sort of consolidation phase. And this is not the time to be doing buys or sells. What we really wanted here was for this to go up higher. And therefore, when it pulls back and retreats and retraces 38.50, whatever percent, we then have a higher low and we can continue doing our buys. But when that doesn't happen, when it gives us this lower high, at the same time we're getting higher lows, there's some sort of, in strength, there's some sort of squeeze play going on here. Now you might recognize it for what it is in terms of chart patterns up above, but in terms of trading, it's nothing to play with. Now, if this is some Mongo channel up here that this represents 30 pips, then there's room to play this, and I would trade the momentum and the impulsivity until it tells me it's not there. Enter the buy, exit. Enter the buy, exit. This thing's going to wind tighter, maybe. The thing that you really need to see is a change in impulsivity, and we don't see it because we're getting qualified at both sides. So typically, this can be in some form a consolidation. If you're really taking this to extremes, you're really going to have to be really good, let's say an Elliott wave, to recognize the difference between a wave 3 triangle and a wave 5 diagonal, because they look kind of the same. A wave 3 triangle, generally is a correction pattern. How you go in is how you go out. Is the end of this typically represents the end of wave 4, and we're going to go on up to 5. But it's going to look very similar, and you have to really kind of know your stuff to know the difference, because they kind of look the same, especially with wicks and this and that, if you're not paying real attention. But the difference is this is coming from a wave 4, and this is the 5. Technically, it's not done until here. And this is an ending diagonal for which price is going to drop out the bottom. So these two are, two different things, even though there's some degree of similarity in how they may appear on your chart. So unless you're really good with Elliott wave and you really absolutely know what's going on per Elliott wave, and this time Elliott wave is right, trading this kind of stuff can be very dangerous because you really don't know what's going on. And sometimes it doesn't have to be something like a triangle. It could just be some sort of weird consolidation that's taking place, one of those complex consolidations. And if we're trading this on a 1-minute chart and these are 10-minute or 1-minute consolidations, it's way too small to be trading. So anytime you get conflicting signals without the disqualified trade in the middle, it's not time to be trading this. You want to see the progressions move up, and technically you really want to see higher lows with higher highs as it moves up. As soon as I get that lower high, I could take this buy, but I have to be prepared to get out really quick. And then if I do have the lower high up here, I still can't take the sell because I don't have anything to show me that this has been a disqualified buy because I took it. I would have needed this to have been a lower low in order to disqualify. Then I could take that sell. So in between impulsivity flips, if I'm moving up, I have to have a no trade somewhere in there before I can take the sell in the opposite direction. And likewise, if I'm in sell mode, I have to have a no trade on a sell somewhere in there in order to take the buy with the impulsivity flip in the opposite direction. The absence of this no trade in the middle creates a dangerous situation, because now we're going to get conflicting signals. We're going to get lower highs and we're going to get higher lows, and we've got some sort of mess going on in here, and I just don't recommend trading in messes. So anyway, that's a little bit tad more advanced understanding of what's going on, particularly things to look for and things to avoid. So I'll close it out there. A little brief session, like I said.